Yeah, okay, so what do you reckon? Here we go. What powers are most productive with challenging children? That's the question, isn't it? And your answers are what? Anybody? Reward and relation. Who says reward? Raise your hand if you think reward's a productive power with challenging children, please. Let's have a look around. Not so convincing. Do it again, let's see. Oh yeah, a bit more convincing, but still some debate. The literature has a debate. You should know. In 1994, someone brought together 42 studies on intrinsic motivation and reward. And then in 1996, 11 people criticised it. And in 2001, they rebutted it. And in 2004, someone did it again. It's just going on and on and on. And it's an interesting area. But it's like we were just talking there about an oppositional defiant child. So the question is, what do you do? Well, I'm not a psych, so I can say this sort of stuff. I have an experiment you can run. You say to the child, let's see how compliant you can be. If you don't get in my way for the next hour, I will give you $10. No, it's simple. It's a lot of money, but it's just a oncer. Now, if the child can be less oppositional and defiant, in fact, not at all, as some kids have been, then we now have an opportunity to say to the child, so you are choosing. And once you can say that, you've got something to work with. So what you need to know with some of these children is how much choice do they really have? And one simple solution is to offer them a huge reward for a once-off effort. And it may not be possible to replicate that effort every day, you know, it may be too demanding, but you reward effort, so at least you know how much effort the kid can make. So reward can be useful, and unless you hate them, they're probably going to want your reward. You know, if you hate them, then maybe they might not want your reward, they might tell you where to stick it. But if you don't hate them, so relationship, how many of you said relationship? Yeah, everybody. So you should. I mean, your experience. This is your reflection. Then explain to me why I can go into a Year 9 class which sounds like this. Okay, Year 9, look, Jason, be quiet, will you? Jason, I've told you already, quiet. Oh, look, I've had it with you. Just go and see Mr. Such and Such. Okay? Now, the example I like to give is that I've been married for 42 years. And if I said, let's say, the last 10 years we've been married haven't been great, have they? So would you please go away and get fixed? Now, the question would be, is this going to enhance our relationship? No. So therefore, anything a school does, anything a teacher does to detract from the relationship between teacher and student is counterproductive, non-professional. It's going to happen. I'll show you data. 41% of teachers say they at least sometimes yell at kids with anger, and 60-something% of kids see it. So it happens, we understand what happens, but when it's systematically imposed, for example, so in all the schools we work with, one of the principles is no one speaks to a kid who's exited or isolated except the teacher who did it. That's a simple principle. Hard to implement because you've got to find time. But in some schools, in secondary, the level coordinator comes in and holds the class and the teacher steps out with the kid. You've got to be creative. But the issue is that if you really say that relationship's critical, and I think you're right, and the research might back you up, we'll see, how do you figure out what schools are doing to these kids, these C's and D's? Because that's not what they're doing. Now, if that were true, okay, which powers don't work with these kids? Any? What do you reckon? Expert, because they don't have the skills to access the materials. So we don't change that necessarily to get expert power either. I watched a kid, this was so sad. This was I just spent 30 days going in and out of one day per school. On invitation, some of the primary, some secondaries. In the primary, I watched a kid, I think, when you put commas in sentences in primary, what year level? Is that grade 3 or something? Who? 2, 3. Yeah, 2, 3. I watched this kid, and he had an aid, and he couldn't read, basically. So he came in and he sat in the mat, and he sort of behaved himself. And then he was asked to go to his aide, who was at his desk, and put the commas in sentences. And as he walked back, I watched him. He looked at the table with stuff on it, and it was quite fine print and close together in the middle of a page. And And he looked at it, and then he sort of didn't go to his table, he started wandering around the room. So his teacher was seated somewhere else trying to do something else, and she ignored him, which is clever. But then he went and got a penguin he'd brought, and he went to her and he picked up a pair of scissors and he says, "I'm going to cut this." And she said, "Your work's waiting for you at the table. Please go back to your table. Your aid is there." So she just, again, not too bad. So he came back and said, in front of him went snip, and snipped off the flipper of his own penguin. And then he says, "You couldn't stop me." All theoretically pure, by the way. And by the end of the, hour, he was sitting in fetal position under his bag in the corridor saying, "I want to be dead. I want to be dead. I want to be dead." And that was what I saw. I found out afterwards the kid's an expert on sharks. Absolutely an expert on sharks. And he has a great spoken vocabulary. He's very good linguistically, not written, but speaking. And so the question that entertains your mind is, okay, if you want him to access the material, why wouldn't you have a big picture of a shark on his bit of paper, 3 sentences about sharks, and you could tap the aide on the shoulder when it comes time to put a comma in or something, and let the aide read it. And you think, okay, but why not? So you're right, expert power is critical.
Yeah, we said there is likely to be resistance, but there's also likely to be compliance and positive.
With the expert. Yeah, depending on how skilled they are, I guess.
Exactly, and what kind of programming put
Absolutely. Absolutely. So expert is going to depend entirely on how able they are to engage the work successfully. So that's a power that is dependent on you. Entirely, really.